Rescue, revamp, create. The art of drum synthesis. The new course is available at Letsynthesize Academy.
Yo, Larson here, welcome to the new Synthesize Sunday episode. And today, because lots of you guys requested, I'm building up a new raw beat from scratch using Phaseplant like this. Like always, you can grab this cool project on my Patreon below with millions of others and click here for my academy if you want to learn more about music production, but right now let's jump into it. Cool, so let's start with the drums, but first let's set the tempo to 174 and like always use a drum rack. The drum rack is so cool, it speeds up your workflow like crazy. So I have a ton of different samples that I could choose from, but I would go with this kick, sounds cool, and this snare, and this snare for the shuffle. Right, so obviously we want to have full velocity and no snap, so right click, copy value to siblings, right, and we can build up the beat. So let's start with 2 bar long length, MIDI clip, and like the regular beat, let's start with the regular stuff, tu-pa, tu-pa. Wicked. And let's place the shuffle. Let's place the second snare for the shuffle. So it is very simple to do. Tum pa tu tum pa tum pa tu tum pa. And this is too high in pitch, so let's drop it down a bit. Oops, but not the kick, but the second snare. Yeah, and it is too long, so let's make it shorter. And maybe if you want, we can high pass it, so we don't have so much low end. That is not very regular for the ghost snares. Yeah, this is cool, but this beat is so boring, so let's do something with it. So let's place the second snare on the place of the kick drum. And let's do the same thing. Okay, maybe spice this up a bit more. That's it. This is what I'm looking for. Yeah, and we need to do something with the shuffles. So maybe we can make it really busy. Yeah, I think this sounds cool, but let's make a different one at the second two bars. Let's go back to the original beat that we have, the tu-pa, tu-pa, and we can have some inspiration from that. Let's make it quiet now, and maybe let's pull this back. And yeah, I think this sounds cool. So we are going for a really broken beat. And now we can add back ghost snares. Maybe we can make these a little lighter. So for the broken beat, tum pa tum pa tum tum pa tum pa tum tum. This is the groove that I'm going for. Tum pa tum ta tum tum pa tum tum. Before the first hit, so these two kicks, I don't want to hear too much going on. Maybe we can kill these. Sorry, after the kick. Okay, we will see how it will go, but right now I think it's fine. Let's drop in a shuffle loop, so something like that. Yeah, it sounds cool. And I want to hear a fill at the end of every, like, second bar. So what you can do is you can go for any old school breakbeat stuff, and this fill is coming from one of them. But it contains too much low end that we cannot do too much with it, and we have some weird high frequency resonance too, so we need to fix them. First of all, I want to filter the highs. Maybe a bit here. Yeah, I think it is fine, but we haven't fixed the low end. So I want to filter it like really heavily with this. So I'm just going for a percussion vibe with this one. Yeah, cool, and let's maybe play with this using a shifter. So we need to automate the chords, but we need to be really careful, we don't want to overdo it. So to avoid that, you have two options. You can go crazy with adjusting the envelopes here, Ctrl G, and map the chords to a macro, and set the range to about -190 and +130. I know this because I made this previously. Alright, so after you've set this up, you can easily set the range here like this. Yeah, and it's interestingly and surprisingly sounds cool. Maybe we should go up a little bit with the high pass. Anyway, so right now, cool, and maybe if you want, you can crank this up a bit, but obviously you need to warp it first. Yeah, it sounds cool, but it's a little chaotic now. And that is because the transient is set to back and forth play mode, so we need to set it one directional. Or we can go with the complex mode. Yeah, I think this is cool. And there is one more thing I want to add here, is some extra hi-hats, so like open hats and stuff like these. Okay, so drop a tempering loop on the first snare. Yeah, it's cool, but I want to hear it a little higher in pitch, because right now it has too much on the mid-highs, so I don't really like it. Cool, but again, the same problem here is... yeah. So setting the grain playback mode to one direction solves the problem, because back and forth just makes it really muddy. Yeah, cool. And let's drop hi-hat loop. And again, I want to hear it a little higher in pitch, so more on the high frequency range, not the mid-highs. Muddy, so set the complex mode. Let's see what we just cooked. Okay, so what I want to hear is more compression, especially on the hats loop, because right now it's just too... So I want to hear a lot more from the tails, not only the body of the hi-hats. So let's drop a simple compression. And with the hi-hats, what I like to do is go crazy with the compression. And just dial back the uncompressed one. Alright, and drop a limiter after that. So let's see what we just made again. And once I found the sound, I like to fine-tune the threshold and maybe the ratio. Okay, the output is fine. Maybe I would just pull back the track volume. Okay, so I think this is fine. Let's group them. Let's call these drums. And let's drop a compressor on top of it. But this time I like to use the glue compressor. And maybe an EQ8 will be necessary after that. And because we EQ, we will have to catch the peaks, so like avoiding digital clipping. But I don't like to use the limiter on the drums, instead the saturator. So let's see what we can bring out of this. And what I like to do is just watch the output peak. And when I see too much on the red line, then I need to pull back the output makeup gain. But right now it is fine, I just catch the peaks. And not too much clipping or saturation is happening. But I think with the compression, the hi-hats is a bit too much, so we can pull them back a bit on the main tracks, and also I can pull back the EQ a bit on the group. And maybe a bit more EQing on the snare bottom, so the low end of the snare. Yeah, so this is with the compression and this is without the compression. So So it has a lot more compressed sound, and actually this is what we wanted to have. Right, so let's go with Phaseplant to create some basses. But before we do that, we need to decide what key we want to make this song in. So I would go with E. Let's make a short run. So first hit, and choose a wavetable from, for example, the spectral. I think this sounds nice because it already contains some really nice robotic, like deep sound. Let's make an LFO to make it move or something. And let's make it really fast. But I like to add some curves to these. Okay, let's see. It already sounds really cool. But we need to have a different group for the bass or for the sub. And for a simple compressed or saturated sine is good enough. But because this is a WOM sound, like a WOM WOM, I want to automate the output gain of the sub. Maybe the main bass too. Alright, what I like to do is add some more articulation for this sound with a high pass filter. Basically this is a classic dubstep process to make it like articulate. Cool, and maybe let's do the same thing with the low pass filter. But let's crunch these together. So the sub should go to lane 3, where I crunch it together with the mid bass. So as you can see, this goes to lane 2 goes to 3. So we have plenty of room to play with, but first I want to go with a saturator. Right, let's go and add an OTT. This is actually important to bring up all those nasty sound. When I hit Control and click on it, it doubles the effect. So quick tip. Okay, sounds cool, but it is a little too quiet. So I pulled back the sub, because when we restored the mid bass and the low, so the sub together, if the sub is too loud, it can easily suppress the mid bass. So if you don't hear just like a distorted sine, just easily pull back the output level of the sub. So it completely suppressed the mid bass. Alright, coolio, let's add the gain, because right now it's a little bit too quiet. And maybe a limiter to the end, so we can forget about clipping. Alright, but I think this sound is lacking some robotic sound, and to add it, resonating would be a good tool. Oops, but the intensity and the decay is too much. So the main bass is in E, but adding a bit of this harmonic resonance can sound great. Okay, right now I think this sounds cool, but we need some serious EQing, so you definitely need the slice EQ. So the other two, the 3-band EQ and the curve EQ, is just simply not strong enough, not powerful enough. We need to pull back the 500 Hz, and maybe if we add a bit of low one. Okay, we will see how it sounds. Okay, so this sound is not bad, but maybe we should play around with that. Okay, it is a lot better now, so with the frame of the wavetable. And some extra unison makes it really screechy. But maybe, I think the height is a little too much. Yeah, I think this sounds fine, so let's build up the first hit of this. So because I said we need to go with an E, the first hit should be F, and then let's drop it down to A. But I think the mid needs a little more boosts. Yeah, they sound cool. So after this, we need a strong reese bass. So again, let's go with a Phaseplant. Let's start with a sub, because this way I want to go with a not a square, with a saw. but I want to add some noise to it. If you pull back the slope, we can get rid of the lows. And if to the right, we get rid of the highs and keep the lows. But I just want to add a tiny bit to it on the higher frequencies. And as you may know, we need to distort these together. And now we need to filter it. I'm cranking up the bias to add a little more grit to this sub. Yeah, I think this sounds like a filtered saw. It sounds great and powerful. But right now we need to make the mid bass. So let's drop it above the sub. Let's call this sub. Let's call this mid bass. Right, and I want to go with the square. With the same thing, I want to add noise. Again, pull back the slope and pull back the level too. And I want to FM it with a saw. So if I put the saw here, it will go out as an extra sound source, an extra sound generator. I don't want that. I just want to use it as an FM modulator. So drop it after the envelope. As you can see, it won't go out. Only these guys will go out. But with this little green plus sign, I can FM it. It sounds horrible now, so it doesn't sound like a reese at all. Let's try to crank up the harmonics of this. So if you detune the harmonic, you can get this really nice wobbly sound. And this is a great thing because you don't want to have a static reese sound. It will not sound well at all. And to make it sound even better, let's use an LFO and let's make it really fast. Automate the master pitch just a bit to add some wobble, so vibrato to it. Yeah, that sounds cool, and maybe automate the FM2 with a different LFO, but this time let's make it synchronized and 1 bar length. 4x4 is 1 bar, so let's click here, FM modulation. So this is the basics of a great reese, but right now we need to process it. First of all, obviously we need to distort it like crazy. And it already sounds great, but let's add a disperser. This is cool because it set it around like the low and mid-low frequencies. It can create a little more chaos, but it won't make the sound muddy if you don't overdo it. So this is a little too much, so pull back the pinch and maybe the amount. But maybe let's add a little more chaos with the unison mode. Let's add some spread. The more tiny movement you add to reese, the better. Okay, this is cool, but we definitely need to pull back the mids a bit. So at around 500 Hz, you know, the mid frequencies. So I'm hearing these extra resonances in the sound that I want to kill just a little bit, and maybe one more at around 400-500 Hz. Yeah, and like always, kill the highs. I think the process of the mid bass is great. Let's route the sub to lane 3 like always and process them together using an OTT. This is a really drastic effect, but I think this will sound great. It glues everything together really heavily, so it is not always the best tool to process a sub and a mid bass together, but you know, try it and find a sweet spot. If you like it, keep it. Let's see what we can do with the phaser to make it even deeper, a little bit deeper at least. But I don't want to make it move at all. I want to have a static effect like an EQ, and I don't want to have a stereo effect on it at all. And after that, a final slice EQ to process the sub and the mid bass that we just created together. A high cut. Maybe the 5K is a bit too much. and at around 1K again. And the muddiness, the mid-low muddiness, around 270. Okay, this is cool, and let's drop a limiter to the end. But we can add one more thing to add a little bit of pitch bend as it goes higher. Okay, so let's add a distortion before the limiter. It adds a lot more aggression, and maybe pull up the lowest part of the modulation to add a little more grit on the very first hit of the bass. I need to mess up the mid-highs a bit more because right now it sounds a bit silly. Anyway, I think this sounds cool. And this is what we just cooked. And it's already too loud, so we need to match the two sounds a bit more. So maybe pull back the distortion, the end distortion. Changing the harmony to +6 makes it even better. But it lacks of stereo informations, so maybe let's drop a little bit of reverb, but make it really shy. Okay, depends on your preferences. This will be great. Okay, but we need to drop something here to this place. So it is so simple in Ableton. As you can see, I just dragged the MIDI here and it automatically copied Phaseplant 2, but obviously we want to make a new instance of sound. So first of all, again, I want to go with the sub. So let's distort it, and basically we are done. Let's call this sub, and let's choose a wavetable for the mid bass and drop it above the sub. So let's call this mid bass with a little bit of noise, because we are making neuro, right? So we need to make some noise and pull back the level to about 10%. We will see later how much it needs, and that's fine, a great wavetable. So let's go with the sweeps. Chirp sounds cool. Okay, we can use this one, but let's modulate it using the 94. Let's speed this up. Okay, let's see what a unison does to this. It is too much, so maybe two voices. I think if we distort this, it will sound cool. So let's drop a distortion. Like it's really loud. So we can do two things. We pull back the gain of the sub, but it doesn't sound neuro at all because it has too much in the mids and the mid lows. So we definitely need, so we can go back with the gain. We definitely need to start filtering this stuff. So let's start with the high pass filter. Okay, but there is too much noise going on, so let's use another filter, but this time with the low pass. Okay, it sounds cool, but we need an OTT. We definitely need an OTT to bring everything together. Okay, if you control click, you can double it. Oh, it sounds, maybe one more. It sounds a lot better. Maybe let's use another filter, but this time with the notch. Let's automate it with the same LFO. Yeah, it sounds really nice. I think I want to go with another filter, but this time with a lot wider. So I just want to hear some noise, put its head up, and some really nasty, neuro-ish, growly kind of thing. So if we crank up the filter slope and pull back the Q, what we can do is something like this. and it sounds like a real neuro bass. But we need another LFO to move this one. Let's crank up. Now I'm keeping the sub on lane 1, because all these effects create some really nice stuff on the low end too, so I don't want to mess it. But maybe let's put a distortion at the end. Another OTT before that. But let's try to kill the sweepy sound with the slide CQ. I'm not a big fan of that sound, so trying to find it. Okay, first of all, let's apply a high pass. Yeah, so I added some more gain without over distorting the stuff. So let's see what we get now. Wow, it's perfect. It plays so well with the fill, this ending fill. Okay, let's copy the first bass. Okay, so what I want to do here is to play a little with audio. So let's create a new audio track and go with resampling and resample this bass. But I want to have a little bit of tail to resample, so to have a little unprocessed sound, maybe a little subby part. But let's deactivate the reverb. Okay, we will see how it sounds. Cool, and let's drop it into a sampler to, play around with it a little. Set the key to E0, deactivate the filter and set the volume to 0 again. And what I love in Ableton sampler is you can play around with the pitch, so you can add FM. So if you pull back the decay, add some volume to it. You can add a little different flavor for the sound. But to make it sound good, we need to find a sweet spot using the sample offset or the sample start slider. Use a notch filter. So if you don't want to have a messed up filter movement or filter behavior, pull back the key here. So we don't need the key tracker at all. Alright, and maybe we can play around with the pitch too. And maybe let's drop an EQ8 after this to chop off the very highs. The mid highs a bit and the mid lows a bit to, kill the muddiness. Alright, so we don't need this audio track anymore, but we definitely need a MIDI clip to play around with this stuff. So let's draw some rhythmical elements, but not enough, but E. Bam, 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 bam. Okay, if we drop it off. Bam, bam, bam. Maybe the ending note should be a little busier, fast. Okay, we have the gunshot F because we are working on audio, so every hit sounds the same. So to avoid this, you can go with LFO2 and set the destination for the sample offset. Crank this up to the maximum, but it is very important to get rid of the retrigger because we don't want to restart the position of the LFO on every hit. Obviously, it won't make any change. We want to have a static movement without any distraction. So it doesn't matter what note I play, I want to have the LFO to go back and forth. So we need to deactivate the retrigger and we set the sample offset as a destination. So as you can hear, it has a different hit on every note. Set the destination to your liking. And you can still play around with the sample offset. Okay, let's see what we made. It has a really nice pam 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 pam, so cool percussion sounding bass. But this is not enough. I want to add a layer on top of this because on itself it sounds boring. So last week I made a video about fillers for liquid drum and bass, but you can use for anything really. If you want to check it, go here. And I put up 77 of these sounds to my Patreon. Nice glitches, so we can use this up in audio format to add a little more articulation for these hits. Because it has this sound that I really love. So let's drop it here. Okay, it sounds cool. Maybe drop this down by a few semitones because we changed the gun, so we definitely need to change the little percussion too. Okay, and let's add a few effects because it is just too dry at the moment. So first I want to start with an EQ to get rid of the unwanted frequencies, especially the very lows, because we already have a really strong low, so the guns. So because the main gun plays around this range of the frequency spectrum, I want to focus a little more here. So this is why I pulled back the EQ. And we need some spatial effects. So for example, let's start with a delay, like a really short, roomy kind of delay. So pull back the feedback, and we don't want any synchronization, but I want to have a different delay time on both of the sides. Yeah, I think it's cool, and just a really short reverb. Okay, and all together they sound like this. And maybe we can go back and play with the FM or whatever you want. Okay, but I think right now they sound cool. So let's call these guns and gun layer. It's not too perfect, but you know, it's a really cool technique, so you can play around with the pitch. Yeah, so if you prefer this, you can use it this way, but we need to make a different bass for the ending part. So again, like previously, copy the MIDI, and it will copy Phaseplant also with that. Let's make a new one and start with the sub like always. Assign, distorted, go to lane 2 with that. Let's call this sub, and let's make the mids. So let's drop it up here. Start with a square with some unison and frequency modulated with the saw on harmonic 2. Obviously this sounds crap now, and that is because we haven't modulated anything. And the first thing that I want to modulate is the FM. Alright, and maybe we need to make this a wobble sound. And let's do the same with the gain of the sub. Okay, let's start to filter these using a high pass filter like always to make it like articulate heavily. Okay, let's see. Another filter, but this time a notch to make it really like a neuro bass. Now it definitely needs a comb filter to add a little more chaos to this sound, because right now it just, you know, sounds like a static bass. But to make it make sense, we don't want to use the same LFO. This time let's use an envelope, like a really long envelope. Yeah, it sounds a lot better if I use the same LFO, because you would not be able to tell the difference. it just moves along with the other modulation, so we want to have a different one. Cool, let's add an OTT, so this will glue the whole thing together. And now we need to treat the sub and the mids together. What else than a distortion? Slide CQ to the end. Yeah, adding the extra FM to the phase instead of the shift makes it sound a lot sweepier and a lot talkier. And also playing around with the shift makes it sound a lot more atonal. A little more growlier too. But this is too quiet at the moment, so we need to add a limiter to the end and maybe add an input gain to it. Okay, but this time the mid's a little too much, so we need to EQ that. The mid lows, as you can see, this peak is just too boomy, so it sticks out too much. Yeah, I think it sounds cool. Let's call these bass or basses instead. Let's color code this to this nice blue, duplicate it. And instead of this bass and the whole stuff on the guns, for the ending I want to use a bass here like this that I just selected. Drag the MIDI control, we can lengthen it, beautiful, put it back to the bass group and initialize Phaseplant. Cool, so right now I want to create a sound that is more on the screamy kind of part of the sound. Let's start with a sine, and this is a regular neuro kind of thing with a higher harmonic sine, like really high. And if we distort it using a saturator, this is what I'm after, but we need to step this forward. Let's add another saw, but with a unison, so this will create nice chaos to the sound. And let's use an LFO to modulate the spread and the blend. So it's so cool because it adds stereo informations on the top of the modulation and also some extra randomness to the sound. But let's make this synchronized and 1 bar length, and maybe let's make a camel out of this. Okay, so the modulation is fine. Let's go with the phaser to make the sound a little deeper. So again, I don't want to have any modulation. This is why I pulled back the depth. But I want to modulate the cutoff, so the tone. So the trick here is, because of the cutoff, the less amount of sub goes into the federator, the more it will screech, or the opposite, if more bass goes into federator, it will scream less. This is why it wobbles. So now we need to find a sweet spot where the scream follows the behavior of the LFO. Yeah, it kind of follows it. So the point here is to make everything controllable and not random. Okay, let's add an OTT. Sounds cool, but maybe a bit more low one is needed. Okay, and the distortion to the end. One more OTT. Okay, to me honestly it sounds fine. Let's see what it does to the beat. Okay, so we have a little mid-low muddiness. Let's fix it using a slice EQ. And interestingly, you can hear it when the music plays or the drum plays. Okay, so when it screams, I miss this section of the frequency spectrum, but when it doesn't scream, it's just too much. So let's modulate to gain. Okay, so to glue together these basses, I like to add a multiband compression. Maybe an extra glue compressor can come handy, but this time go a lot sensible with it. Right, and the only thing we need to add here is a sidechain, that you can do it on yourself, and a master. But I don't want to go too crazy with the master, I just want to drop a limiter. But I don't really like Ableton built-in limiter, instead I want to use Pro L. And maybe some extra EQing is needed because the mid-highs and the highs are a little too much. Obviously, the multiband compression adds a little more to it, so I think it would be a good idea to color everything at the end on the group. Okay, and finally I want to add a riser to this part, so as a transition from sections to section. Like, we don't need to overcomplicate this at all. This should be really simple sound, but we need to add the note first. Right, let's find a random wavetable. It doesn't really matter. You will see later if you like it or not. Like, let's go with a Squelchy 3. Let's add a huge amount of unison and even extend the range. Mess it up even more with the band warping mode. Okay, and the comp filter from the miscellaneous. We need to move this to have the effect that I'm looking for. So first of all, let's set the length of the LFO to 1 bar and click on the trigger. And on the level 2. Cool, let's add the distortion, but I want to filter it before distortion. And then an OTT. And a high pass, low pass from the multi, so LH. And maybe with the LE for 1, modulate the global amplitude. So fine tune the cutoff to your taste, but right now I think this is fine. Yeah, so I'm not going to tweak this sound further. You can do it if you want. You get the idea. Grab this project from my Patreon below with millions of others, and check my academy if you want to dig deep into music production. But see you guys next time. Peace.